So we're so happy that you're here. So today we're going to be talking about, so this is a little series that we're doing where we're talking about different features of Janet and helping folks understand, how that feature works, who might use it, what it's useful for. And today's topic is Janet Cloud Tables. So Janet Cloud Tables are a flexible tool to help your team get started using Power BI to possibly build some of your own reports. So we're going to be talking about that today. We are so happy that you're here. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. As I mentioned, I'm Ginger Bandine. I'm here in Portland, Oregon. You also see, sorry, yes, I know, Jen, you can't see everybody else. I'm sorry. Crystal is here, also in Portland. Colin's here, but not on video, also in Portland. Andrew is here in Philadelphia. We're all happy to be here. So just a couple quick introductions. Like I said, I'm Ginger. I'm the founder and CEO at Mission Driven Data. We started this company about 5 years ago. We help agencies understand information in their electronic health records and also get better information out and available to them through other systems like whole person outcomes. I started off as a clinician and I still hold my social work license. And I love helping people. I love helping people who are curious about data have ways to explore that curiosity without getting overwhelmed. And so that's why I'm excited about the Janet Cloud Tables, is that it's a way to have kind of a fun experience of playing with your data without kind of getting stuck or overwhelmed. So that's what I'm excited about Janet Cloud Tables. And we also have Andrew Sather here. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. I'm Andrew Sather. I'm the Director of Product and Services for Mission Driven Data. And I most recently, before I joined Mission Driven Data, was a CIO at a behavioral health agency here in Philly. And I was actually just doing the math. I've been in IT in some form or another, or managing data in some form or another for 20 years, like one nonprofit or another, just not necessarily behavioral health. And I'm excited about Janet Cloud Tables because I feel like it's just been a long time coming. I work directly with a lot of our clients who really are interested in exactly what this does, what Janet Cloud Tables does, but they maybe don't have like the coding background, or maybe they do have the coding background, but they don't want they want to be in the cloud. And this solution kind of like lets you do all of this stuff. So that's why I'm excited. I think there are a lot of people who can benefit from it.
Thanks, Andrew. And Crystal, I just realized we don't have a slide about you, but do you want to say hi? Crystal's going to stay on mute because we're in the same room, but Crystal Vega is also here. She is our manager of strategic projects, and we're happy to have her here too. So Mission Driven Data, we do three things. We help agencies with data projects out and other functionality that expands the functionality of the credible electronic health record. We have a free online community where we offer events. This event is a little bit more Janet specific, but lots of our events are applicable regardless of whether you use Janet. And then we also offer consulting services to help agencies who are wanting to get more out of the data they are getting from their electronic health records. So you're in the right place today. If you are excited to try building some Power BI reports, but not as excited about learning SQL, or it's okay if you're also excited about learning SQL, but this is a SQL neutral idea. You're also in the right place if you're interested in learning more about Power BI data sets that make sense to you, or maybe learning Power BI using a data set that makes sense to you, which I always think is a better way to learn something. Is a lot of people take Power BI classes where the data they're playing with is like sales data, and it's really hard to understand how you would use the principles you're learning with a data set that makes sense to you. So anyway, you're also in the right place if members of your team are curious about data and you'd like to give them the opportunity to expand their knowledge. And also if there are just features of Power BI you'd like to explore more on your own. Sometimes it's fun to kind of have a little bit of a sandbox where you can try things out without breaking things, try things out that you've seen online, just kind of like practice some skills, even if they're not quite the thing you need right away, but like you just want to yeah, try some features out. So our agenda is today we're going to talk about why we developed the Janet Cloud tables, how that whole thing works, what are some of the tables and options, things for you to consider as you're thinking about using Janet Cloud tables, and then the steps for getting started. Sorry. Sometimes I have to remember to take a deep breath because I get so excited when I'm talking, everyone. So I just wanted to remind everyone that and also I'm so sorry I forgot to silence my phone, everyone. I think because I was a little distracted about this whole earthquake thing. Okay. So we're recording today's session so you can relax and I did make sure we're recording, so that's good. We would love it if people ask questions as we go. So as we're going through things, this is meant to be interactive. We want you to participate. And we'll send out some information by email after the webinar, probably a copy of the slides and maybe a handout about how Janet Cloud tables work. So we always like to kick things off with a poll. Stand by and I will get that up. Polls. There we go. Okay, so you should be seeing a poll. We would love to know, of the folks that are here joining us today, what is your experience making reports in Power BI? Would you say that you are a beginner? Maybe you have no experience, maybe you're intermediate, advanced, or expert. No pressure. We just wanted, it's always kind of fun to know who's here with us. And then the second question is, what are some of the topics are you interested that you're interested in reporting on? Is it things related to visits, appointments, demographics, payers, or something else? And if we miss something that seems important, like pop us a note in the chat. We love to hear from you about that stuff. So yeah, thanks everybody for filling out the poll. Looks like we have a mix of folks here. Looks like quite a few folks who identify as beginners. Some folks who identify as having no experience, and then a handful of folks who are in the intermediate advanced expert bucket. And it looks like most folks are most interested in client visits, clients and demographics, clients and insurance and payers, and maybe some appointments, and people are interested in all those things. So thanks everybody for participating in the poll. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Okay, great. And then there's some chat too about Alex posted, we're working on Power BI reports for costing and staff productivity. Jen's talking about needing to create a dashboard for billing, denial reasons, and that's not always super fun. Actually, that's something I've been thinking about too. So cool. So, a little bit of background about why we decided to go down this route. I'll start this off and then I'll ask Andrew to chime in with some thoughts too. But I think, our decision to, we're always trying to think about how, the purpose of Janet is to make it so that agencies have access to the information that you need to do the work you do, as, and to improve and to expand and to do all the great things you do. And so we're always trying to think of different ways to help agencies overcome different challenges and barriers that happen that get in the way of that. So what we had noticed was that a lot of agencies struggle with, or if you're the agency itself, but also like members of the team struggle because they don't always have a lot of knowledge of SQL. It's a really hard to find time to learn and practice. And sometimes there's no easy way to do that. Sometimes like the kind of hardware you need to run, Janet is available in our cloud, but some agencies also run a version on-prem. And sometimes there's a hardware cost to that agencies just don't have a way to absorb that. SQL Server licensing ends up being needed if you're doing a bunch of stuff on-prem sometimes. And so sometimes that's a barrier. And sometimes there's just not enough space on various hard drives on your, in your local world to do things like you might want to do. What else would you add, Andrew? Why else? What were some of the other things we thought about? Or how else would you say that?
I guess I think that one of the core issues with one of the core issues that to add to the SQL point is that really the point of Power BI is supposed to democratize managing these visualizations. You're supposed to be able to use Power BI to build visualizations against data and explore data, even if you do not have, as I said in my earlier slide, 20 years of IT experience, right? Like you should not need that to explore your data. And that's the whole point of Power BI. But the issue that we were running into is that like just because of the way Credible is built and the way that Credible presents its data, that happens to be that happens to be step one, right? Of getting your data out and into that visualization. And so this started off as a way to say like, what can we do to make that easier? But I definitely don't want to lose the people here who do know SQL really well. I want to say that like there is actually like one of the cool improvements or one of the cool things that we've done with this feature recently was actually build in the ability for you to do that as well. So I'll just throw that in there as like a don't despair. Your time to shine is coming. No.
Ah, yes. Okay, thanks, Andrew. And Crystal is in the same room as me, so she's muted, but she just added a note to say that this is also a way to engage more staff in the data-driven decision-making kind of process, you know. So, and in the decision-making around what kind of data you might look at. So what were you going to say, Andrew? Sorry.
I think that's a great point that Crystal made, because I think that like and maybe actually you and I have talked about this, Crystal, before. I forget who I had the conversation with, but I feel like the more I am in like an IT role, the more I realize that IT is often well positioned to build like reports and systems for clinicians, but often the clinicians are better positioned if they just had like that one thing, right? That one skill set that they could jump behind and jump ahead of. And I feel like it's really amazing when you see folks who have done this work, have been on the front lines for years and years, pick up that one skill that they need to start taking apart their data. They do it. They may not be as efficient as someone right away as someone who's been doing it for years and years and years, but they get exactly what they need. They know their problem better than anyone else, right? Like I will never be able to describe the problem of a frontline clinician, much like a frontline clinician, nearly as well as a frontline clinician. And that's really what this is about, is like, what can we do to open this up a little bit so that people who don't have all that experience in IT, but do have the experience they need, the lived experience they need to actually, understand the problem they're trying to solve. How can we get them involved in it?
Great. Thanks, Andrew. So that was our inspiration to build this tool we are calling Janet Cloud Tables. Janet Cloud Tables is just another feature of Janet, just to be clear. It's not like an extra module. It's included in Janet. It's just another functionality we built. And so the Janet Cloud Tables allows us to helps people facilitates developing custom reports and dashboards. It doesn't require SQL licensing, and it uses what we're doing is publishing a subset of credible data that is organized and based on our experience, the tables that people often start off needing, so that agencies can build their team capacity and have opportunity. But there's also, like as Andrew hinted, an opportunity to build some of your own queries and have those also feed in to the Janet Cloud Tables, which is really cool. So both being a way for it's sort of like a starter pack and also like an expandable, there's expansion packs available. Oh my gosh, I'm not a gamer. So someone please translate that into things that make sense to you. But yeah. It's great for all levels of folks. Yes. Okay. So how does Andrew, do you want to take this slide and explain how Janet Cloud Tables work?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is how Janet works, right?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay, all right. Yeah. So Janet is the soft. Go ahead, Ginger. No, please.
It's a combination because there's a place in your where the Janet. Yes, both parts.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, so for folks who do use Janet, it's a tool that allows you to pull out the data in your Credible EHR into a local MS SQL database, and there are, as like was prefaced earlier with a couple slides ago, right? There are a bunch of agencies who maybe would hear that and their eyes would glaze over, and that's why we created to begin with, like this thing called the Janet Cloud, where we just do all that for you. We do the work of running Janet, pull the data out of Credible for you, and then it sits nicely on our cloud infrastructure. And so like basically like when on that flow chart here that you see, like we take care of, or we started taking care of with Janet Cloud, everything all the way up to the starting with the little database symbol at the bottom right with the SQL, the SQL right there on the bottom right icon there. That's the database for all the data sets. And then we also started, you know, as part of like just working with agencies, we also started building out reports for folks and writing our own SQL to take the data in Credible and turn it into something digestible that could appear on a dashboard. And that's that next step, the Janet SQL executes. But what we're layering on here is we're saying, hey, if you are in our cloud, like one thing that we can do is we can take some SQL that we wrote that pushes together those popular data points that Ginger was just talking about and puts it into a nice digestible, like easily understood data set. And we'll execute those for you and we'll publish that data set to your Power BI tenant. So we're going to take all that data and it's going to do the thing that if you're already using Janet, you already have, which is your own Power BI tenant. We're going to publish that, but we're going to publish it as what what Microsoft calls a semantic model. And if you've been using Power BI for a while, you might know it as a data set. They're the same thing. They just rebrand everything every 6 months to keep us on our toes. And so the semantic model will sit in your Power BI tenant, and that's just a blob of data that from your Power BI desktop application, you can connect directly to. And you can build visualizations directly off of that without having anything on premise that you would normally have to make that happen. Would you say that differently, Ginger?
Nope, that's similar to what I would say. I guess the cool thing about that is that there's the data that flowed all the way from Credible through Janet to your Power BI, where you're connecting to it from your desktop up to the Power BI cloud, grabbing that data, building reports. The cool thing about that is that data set gets refreshed automatically. So when you finish a report, if you want to publish that report, the data is already hooked up back behind the scenes. It's already following the little breadcrumb trail all the way back and grab. So every time your nightly data refresh, or if it happens more often than nightly, every time that data refresh happens, it automatically is updating that data set. Am I saying that? Am I saying it right, Andrew?
That's how I would say it. Yep.
Yeah. So the cool thing is that you're now kind of, you're building this cool report, and when it's ready to go, you could also publish that report and you already have it hooked up to being refreshed off of Janet data. So that whole flow is sort of happening without you having to worry about it. All you're doing is opening a Power BI desktop, connecting to that, grabbing that data from the data set that it's published out there as, and then doing whatever you want in Power BI desktop with it, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And just a reminder, folks are very welcome to put questions in the chat, but we'll move on to the next slide here. So this is the sort of starter pack of Janet Cloud tables. So we've done and apologize for the trailing E under client episode. We realized that when you download slides from our slide builder, it does that, which is cute. So anyway, again, this is based off of our experience of kind of the tables that we noticed people need kind of right off the bat to kind of make some basic reports that they will find useful and helpful. So tables related to client visits, tables related to relationships between clients and employees, clients and programs, teams as employees, the planner table, which is where all of your appointments live, the payer table, which is where insurance information lives. Yeah. But the cool feature of how we're pulling several of these tables is that we're using your data dictionary to find the column names you've renamed things to. So like in the clients table, if you have things in your data dictionary you've defined as different columns, we go ahead and match that column name to the column name in the data dictionary. And remind me if this is true, Andrew, then we also have the raw table with the raw column name too. Am I right about that?
We do. It's all one table. So like the client's table will have columns based off of how you name them in the data dictionary, and it will have columns with the same exact data point, right? But it'll be exact what the field is actually called in the back end of Credible.
Right. So you know how some agencies have, they're using like DD1 is the table, is the technically the raw table column name in Credible, but you call DD1 like, oh, I don't know, housing status, right? So it would, there'd be a column called housing status in the table that you could play with, but we'd also have DD1 there just in case like you've already built a query somewhere else that uses DD1 and you know, want to do something with that. And then also if it's a lookup, how does that work, Andrew? If the data dictionary field maps to a lookup?
Yeah, that was a fun one to do. So we went through, we built some pretty cool SQL that looks at exactly how you define a lookup to work. Because you know there are a bunch of different ways you can build a dropdown in your data dictionary. And there are a bunch of different ways you can customize that lookup so that sometimes it looks at the lookup dictionary, sometimes it looks at something else completely different. Sometimes you have criteria that you want to filter it by, filter the possibilities by. We built dynamic SQL that automatically pulls exactly the value that you picked. So that if, for example, if you have DD1 and that's a dropdown for housing status, and you are storing, if you know, and if you know the dictionary and you've done reports off of Credible, this is familiar to you, you're actually storing the ID of the lookup. So instead of like housing status, and then it's, you know, like experiencing homelessness, but it doesn't store experiencing homelessness. You know, it stores like ID number 916, and you have to go into the lookup dictionary to find out that that's experiencing homelessness. We just take that we just go and look for that value for you, and we put that right there. So there's no fancy, like there's no fancy relationships you have to build. The actual information that you need is already sitting in the Janet Cloud table, no joins, it's just right there for you.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I like there's some great comments. Thanks everyone in the chat. Like Jen pointed out, she already has the text 8 memorized as one of the fields that they use all the time. Yeah, Jen, and about billing and claim stuff, sure. We're going to get to the next slide about other things we have ideas for, the expansion packs that Janet Cloud Tables would have. But yeah, we're pretty excited about this. I think yeah, I think we are excited for people to start using it and to find out what other things people need. We're going to talk about what like there are just a couple of like limiting factors we have to consider because of some Power BI like functional limitations on how much data you can publish and stuff like that. But we're really excited about making this really flexible and helpful. But again, if you think about like if you have your clients table and your client visit table and you can pull those into Power BI and start playing with them, like you could really build a lot of cool reports and really learn a lot about how Power BI works and maybe also what you really need for a report. Because I would say a lot of how I do development when I'm making a report is like, I'll build my table that I think I'm going to want of all the stuff I'm going to need for my report. Then I open up Power BI and I start building the report and I think of other things. You know, I think of how I want it to be organized. I think of different pieces and how I want to work, like add it up or different things. And so the cool thing about this is that like you get to do that same playing with things, you know, you get to play with it in Power BI and think about what you need. So we're really excited for people to get started using this. Is there anything else you would say about this piece, Andrew?
No, I think no, this particular part, I think we're good. No, I think my stuff is coming on the next slide. So yeah.
Okay. So additional options. This is very exciting stuff. So as we mentioned, you know, we're very open to thinking about like what else could we add into some of these Janet Cloud tables, you know, like what are some structured data sets that could be helpful for agencies. I've thought about like we already have all of our smart tables that run our core reports. Technically they could already connect to those too, right, Andrew?
Yeah, technically it's the same process. In fact, you'll trip over them on your way to Janet Cloud tables when you go
Right,
to the next step. Yeah.
yeah, you'll see our smart tables in there. So like you could still do the same thing off of like our current like aging table, you know, like smart aging already has all the data. It's not quite as if you're a beginner, it might be a little more confusing because more of the fields are not like core fields. We've built some calculations in there. But then there's like even more cool things. Andrew, talk about more of the cool things.
Sure, yeah. Well, so the stuff that's on the slide, which is, and this is the stuff that gets super where I feel like things get really excited. And I'm gonna go out of order and hit up the thing that I'm personally most excited about, which are ad hoc queries. That this previously, like with Jana Cloud tables, like we've been trialing this for a while, and previously, like the drawback has always been, okay, that's great, but like, I want to write SQL. How do I want to build my own thing, my own data set. How does that work for me if I don't have an MS SQL Server on-prem? And so the way that we expanded Jana Cloud Tables was to open it up to ad hoc queries. So if you are a SQL developer and you're used to using the export tool Incredible to write your own, to build your own reports, then you can take those with you to Jana Cloud Tables. Like if you have exports right now, Incredible, that are humming along fine, and gosh, wouldn't it be great to take that data and turn it into visualizations? You've already done the hardest part is writing the code, right? You've already done that. Like those come with you to Jana Cloud Tables. So you can come to us and you can say, hey, I really want to turn on export ID 74, right? And that is my custom aging report, and I want that to be available to me in Jana Cloud Tables. We can do that. So then you will be able to connect to your own data that was generated off of a report that you built Incredible, off of SQL that you wrote, but it's going to come through directly into the Power BI desktop application. So you did the work, just that now you have that report, you have the raw data, Incredible. Now turn that into a visualization in Power BI, and to take that next step, right? Would you say it differently, Ginger? Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
but what I was gonna say, that's exactly that piece I was describing, right? Because like the coolest way to make a report is start with a query, have it come through, see what you can do with it in Power BI, and then be like, oops, I also need, client
Yes.
visit. So
Yeah.
then you could just go edit that query because once it's out there, the next time Janet runs, it'll just refresh it with what you've changed it to. And so the next time you go to look at it in Power BI Desktop, it'll have more fields, the ones that you added, which is magic. It's so cool. I mean, there's a little bit of a delay because it has to like work through Janet, but I mean, it's still so much better than just pretty exciting stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't, so I mean, that's super cool. I especially I recognize some names on the participant list. So I want to definitely highlight that as like the folks who I know write SQL day in and day out, as part of their day work. Like this to me would be, I wish I had that 5 years ago, right? It would have made my life, would have made my journey to Power BI so much easier. I think the other things I wanted to highlight here are we can absolutely, for folks who do not have SQL developers on site and whose needs go beyond those 14 tables, nothing stops us from expanding that out. We can bring in other tables on request, but also we can build custom data sets, and we've done this before, like in kind of we never called it Jana Cloud tables, but we certainly have before worked with agencies to say, okay, like we will write SQL that will give you that pristine data set that you need to turn, and then now you can take that and turn that into a Power BI dashboard. Now we can do that as part of Jana Cloud Tables. So you can work with our professional services team to get that perfect data set that then pulls in to Jana Cloud and pulls into your Power BI application. And now you can do the work of turning that into the visual that you want it to be, or multiple visuals, whatever. Maybe, one data set can power lots of dashboards, right? Would you say that differently, Ginger? Is that like or
Nope.
anything
Yeah.
to add?
Yeah, so we can help you make some tables, or if we've already made a table that works that fuels one of your existing reports, that's easy for us to add. Yeah. And then what's another one? I see there's a question in the chat from Jen. I'll get to it, Jen. Tammy has a question about form data and answers. Can you pull that into Janet? That would be a good question. It depends if it's using the Z form table or if it's using the straight. We can help you modify a query if we don't have the Z form tables because technically Z form tables are views that Credible builds. But we know how to pull that data we know how to translate that into a query that can pull this way. So yes, Jen's like, it's better not to use Z forms. We know, but sometimes people use it. sometimes easier to use Z-form tables, but they're not available in Janet because they are technically views in Credible. So those views are technically Credible's intellectual property. So, but yeah, we could talk about that, Tammy. There's a way to do it. It's not that hard. If you've already got it figured out what you need from a form, then pulling the answers and questions isn't too bad. Oh, and
Oh,
if it's not a Z form, then it'll just work.
it'll
Yep.
work. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Cool. And Jen, I'll get to your question in a second here. Andrew, do you want to talk about, or go ahead, what were you going to say?
I don't want to lose non-credible data as well, because we obviously, like, we do a lot with credible data, but we also plug into a bunch of other systems. And so the nice thing about Janet Cloud Tables is, while we're launching right now with these out of the box, credible out of the box, data sets, there really isn't anything stopping us from pulling in data from all these other systems that we've started to plug into, like SurveyMonkey or JotForm or Paylocity, Paycom, ADP, all those, like Relias, all those ancillary systems that a lot of behavioral health agencies use, that that we've worked really hard to get access into. And now we have standard operating procedures to zoom in on all of those, connect to them, and we can bring them in via Janet Cloud Tables as well on request.
Great. I was going to try to answer Jen's question. Jen was talking about connecting directly to Power BI to Credible. I know Jen is saying anyone can do that. I don't know very many people have figured out how to do that. And the pulling parameters thing is, yeah, if you had written, so again, this would maybe work for you, Jen, because if you wrote an ad hoc query that pulled certain things out of, basically created a query that was like, perhaps like based off of get date, right? So like pull everything in the last 90 days, then every time Janet would run, it would refresh based off of the last 90 days and pull you that data into a cloud table that you could use. So I think it would maybe help with that problem. Yeah, and the ad hoc connecting Credible to Power BI, I don't know very many, you might be the only person I know who's figured that out, to be honest, Jen. So that's why people are using Janet to do that. And I also don't know if it's and I don't know if this also is partly why you're mentioning it, but I would assume it would be very slow, and potentially bottlenecked, but yeah.
I've never done that specifically with Power BI, but I used to back in the day, do that with Excel. And it was like, to me, it was just the delays that's why I stopped. The delays killed me. I don't know, maybe it's better in Power BI, but the connection between there, and it was just like, you were just sitting and waiting, especially with the big giant data sets, you were sitting and waiting for Credible to turn away. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we've talked about all the cool things. I think then we do need to talk a little bit about things to consider, right? Because there are some things we have to consider when we're publishing data sets or semantic models to Power BI. I'll say one because I understand that. Oh, and I forgot to write out the subheading. That's cute. Sorry, everybody, about the slide. But the subheading for data set size is that, is it okay if I skip row level security and talk one through? Okay. So data set size. So technically, the largest data set you're allowed to publish to a Power BI workspace is 1 GB of data. Power BI organizes the data in a different way. So what I found is that even a file that's on your desktop that looks like it's over a gigabyte, like by a little, will still sometimes publish out to Power BI, but it does have a limit. Like we sometimes run into this. So there is a little bit to think about. What I've noticed in terms of data set size is what seems to make a bigger difference is how wide the data is, not necessarily how many rows, but I'm sure you could get to a point where too many rows would be a problem too. But so one of the things we try to think about if we're publishing a big data set is how many columns do we really need? And you know how sometimes when you're writing a query, you're just like select star from client visit or select star from whatever table, which means you're selecting all the columns. Sometimes if you're going to be pulling a lot of data that you want to use this way, it might be better to think about what columns you really need, or at least take out ones you know you don't need. Because sometimes even empty columns just take up more space in the data set size. So that is one limitation, is per data set, you can only publish a 1 GB data set at a time. So that's something to think about. Okay, I'm going to get back to your question, Jen. Andrew, do you want to talk about row level security?
Sure. Yeah. The row level security for folks who are using it, that there are a bunch of steps you can follow in Power BI to customize individually what data people see based off of what their role is, who they are in the agency. And if you're curious to learn more or how to do that, we have a webinar about that in our community that I just realized I didn't know the final call to action that Colin can share, a link that Colin can share in the chat. But we just recorded something a couple of weeks ago about that and about like credible specific row level security, several options that Janet subscribers have to kind of customize how they do that. But in short, like the issue to consider here with Janet Cloud Tables is row level security. One core aspect of that is that it applies at the data set level, not on your report level. So if you have one report or if you have like a dozen reports looking at one data set, which is kind of what Janet Cloud Tables is, right? We are publishing a data set, a semantic model, and then like 4 different people are building 3 different reports, and that's 12 reports total, right, off of the same thing. Your row level security is going to apply at that semantic model level, and then all of those subsequent reports will be impacted as well. So just take that into consideration. Usually that's what you would want, right? Usually that's not a bad thing. But like there could be there could be that minor issue where you're like, oh, well, I wanted this kind of row level security here and that kind of row level security there. That's something we can absolutely address and we can work with you on to figure out how to solve. It's just not something that out of the box right away we can do. It would just whatever row level security rules you have are what are going to apply there.
I think that's an important thing to consider too, because if you don't have any rules on a data set, that's just something to keep in mind, that the same no rules will also be on the new report you publish.
Absolutely.
Let's see. I could probably talk about daily updates, which is just that this data refreshes at the same schedule you have your Janet data refresh set up to do. There are agencies now who pull some pieces of Janet throughout the day a few times. And so it is possible we could also set some of this up to pull in those periodic refreshes, but it's just something to keep in mind that it's not live data, right? It's there's sometimes there is like that little bit of delay. And then Andrew, do you want to talk about Power Query Editor?
Yeah, Power Query Editor is what most folks might know this as the transform data option in Power BI. It's a very powerful and really nifty tool that if you write SQL, you tend not to use as much. But if you don't, it ends up being kind of nice. It's a nice option to have. It lets you do a lot it lets you transform your data. It's exactly what it sounds like, right, in Power BI. Unfortunately, the way that Power BI is designed at this exact moment, like how Microsoft is currently supporting Power BI, a connection to a live semantic model, which is what this is. It's a connection to a data set in the cloud. They don't support the transform data or Power Query Editor functionality for that kind of connection. So like if you're used to using transform data, say because you're bringing in spreadsheets or because you're connecting directly to an MS SQL server and then you're using transform data there and using that point and click user interface to manage and change your data, unfortunately, that won't be available to you with Janet Cloud Tables only because it's a limitation of Power BI.
Yeah. So if you were needing to do something like that, we'd have to come up with a different solution. But I think this kind of speaks back to the sort of the challenge we were trying to overcome with Janet Cloud Tables, which was honestly a little bit more for like users who want to make some reports who probably aren't doing stuff in Power Query Editor. But if as you cross that bridge into doing that, then we probably need to come up with a different solution. So, and we have other solutions, but that might mean that might be the changeover when you would move from this solution to the next. So if you were wanting to move forward with doing these Janet Cloud Tables, there's some admin settings that you would change. We can probably just send that out with our handouts from today's session. Crystal, I'm making eye contact with you, but yeah, you're getting it, right? Okay, Crystal will make sure we send that out. Then you'd want to let one of us know, whoever you're working with, or if no one else, if you're not sure who that is, you can reach out to me to let us know that you'd like to turn that on. Figure out what workspace you would like to have those tables in. So a lot of times, like I recommend having a draft or sandboxy kind of place where you do play with data a little bit. And that might be a good place to start for those tables. And then thinking about what the export IDs are, if you have any ad hoc queries that you want to pull into your Janet Cloud tables. So yeah, and then of course, like this is all for folks who are using Janet. If you're not quite using Janet yet, then start using Janet, and then we would turn all this on for you. So, but yeah, again, this is if you haven't been coming to webinars, or if this, one of the things that we have really been striving to do, especially over the last few months here at Mission Driven Data, is think of new features that could make life better for everyone and get those in your hands. Like that's what we're doing. That's how we rolled out whole person outcomes. That's how we're rolling this out. Like basically like try to like take down the sort of delays and barriers. Like it's kind of funny because we talk about access to treatment being really important, that like when someone's in the moment of wanting help, let's say with an addiction, that like you need to get them a bed right then, that's this like golden moment. In a funny way, like the moment someone's interested and curious about data is the moment to like get them access to some data they could go play with, right? Because it really burns people out on this side. People get really sad right away, really fast if they say like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this and I'm kind of curious about that. And then it's like a really long delay. So we're trying hard to not have that be the experience people have. So Crystal, being Crystal, already put the admin settings in the chat if you want to get them right away. And we'll send out more after today's session. And of course, if you're watching this on the recording, you're always welcome to reach out to us to get that kind of stuff. Great. Let's see, I'm just scrolling back through the chat to make sure I didn't miss any questions. I think there was one more from Jen. Jen, yeah, maybe we could talk offline about some of those because you're doing some fancy stuff. We could talk. Also, I haven't talked to you in a while. It'd be fun to catch up. So if you have other questions, though, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So let me start another poll here. Great. Okay. All right. We would love to know what Friday feature. We tease each other because we're all calling it something different, which is just what we're doing. Which Friday feature topic would you like to see us do next? So these are some ideas we have for some upcoming Friday features. One is to talk about Relias data, which is something that we have built. We have some tools to make it easy to analyze your data out of Relias. So we would be excited to share with you guys about that. Report alerts, let me just, so what report alerts kind of sounds like it could be lots of things, but what we mean by report alerts is we've developed a way to build custom alerts based on any kind of data you want in Credible or in other systems, and customize how those work. So this was in response to people identifying that sometimes the notification triggers in Credible aren't ideal and don't function in the way people wish they would. And so we've built a more flexible solution that does a similar thing, but with a lot more finesse, I guess might be the word. What else would you say about that, Andrew, the report alerts thing?
I think that I think that report alerts, I think where report alerts improves on the functionality, the existing functionality Credible, is that it allows you to, as Ginger said, alert someone about a particular event that happens in your data. It could be Credible or elsewhere. It could be a combination of two different data points, which would be really cool, right? Like if this happens in Relias and also this other thing happens in Credible, notify this person, right? But what's really where it gets super interesting and powerful is you can notify people, who you notify can be dynamic based on the data itself. So like, which is something that you just cannot do in Credible. It's very difficult. So like, if you've ever experienced that issue with notification triggers where you either have to choose the wrong people to get the alert or everyone gets the alert and like, right? Like, or everyone either like 90% of the people get the alert, weren't supposed to get it, or no one's going to get the alert, right? If you've ever experienced that frustration, that's what this is supposed to address, is you can really customize that dynamically based off of your data, which is super spiffy.
Cool. And then the Azure/Entra Active Directory data integration, the use I've heard a lot for that is checking to see if people who no longer work for you maybe still have access to Credible, or maybe you know, some of your security. So it's a little bit of a administrative support. So you know, keeping track. So Azure or Entra or Active Directory is where agencies are often storing like information about who has a login to like the rest of your Microsoft world. Although it's also where it would store whether people have access to Power BI or to your Power BI reports, because you need an account in there to be part of your Power BI tenant. But I think this idea that for some agencies, it gets a little overwhelming, especially if you have a lot of folks or you have limited resources to keep track of how many people. Like, one thing is people don't want to be paying for an account Incredible if there's a staff who's no longer there. They also don't want an account Incredible that's active if the staff is no longer there. And also, I don't know if anyone else has ever run into this where someone's worked for you for 6 months and then you realize they've never even logged into your EHR because they didn't realize that was because that something got missed. So keeping track of that kind of stuff too sometimes is useful. So that's another integration that might be a little more on the technical side compared to what we talked about today, but it might be something other folks at your agency might even be interested in. And then there's a short answer question where you can give us some ideas of other things you might like to talk about. So yeah, thanks everybody for letting us know what you're interested in. I'll go ahead and end the poll. If you have more things you want to do, let us know too in the chat. Okay.
I did see, sorry. I
Go
talked
ahead.
I'm sorry, Jen mentioned in the chat, like, you know, she had to figure out about, for notifications, for alerts, report alerts, you'd have to figure out how to handle licensing. And that is another interesting and nice thing about report alerts is that you report alert recipients do not have to be Power BI license holders. So you can send an email and notify someone about something without necessarily requiring them to have a Power BI license. There are implications of that, and we can talk that through if anyone's interested, but I just wanted to highlight that. That's a cool feature.
Yeah, and we're kind of doing a preview already of what the next Feature Friday sounds like based on what folks were interested in. Sounds like that might be our next Feature Friday, which would be very cool. So so stay tuned. That'll probably be the next one we'll do, just based on what I just saw glancing at the poll results. Hey, I wanted to remind everybody that we have a really exciting guest speaker coming up this month talking about the WHO-5, which is, if you weren't aware, that's the survey we're using for whole person outcomes. It's a 5-question index that asks people about their well-being. We are sending that out on your behalf to your clients via a text message every Monday night. If you would like, it's included in Janet. It's a feature of Janet. I just want to do a quick shout out that the agencies who have implemented whole person outcomes are seeing around a 30% response rate to that survey, 20 to 30%. We've been blown away by the results that we're seeing. It's just so exciting. Sorry, I have to give a quick plug because it's so exciting that clients who are out there who receive this text message survey want to fill it out, that 1/3 of the folks are like, and only 1% have opted out, which is amazing. So if you aren't already using whole person outcomes and you want to learn more about why we're excited about it, you might want to sign up for this webinar, or you might just want to email us and tell us so we can get you started. It's very exciting. You're able to see the data over time. You're able to see the folks who are struggling. We're also seeing cool things like people fill out the survey even if they just no-showed for an appointment. So you might know more about the folks who are not engaged in services and whether the reason they're not there is because they're doing better, or maybe the reason they're not there is because they're doing worse. So quick shout out for that. So on April 25th, we're going to have Dr. Andrew Downs here, who has done research using the WHO-5, where he did a lot of work to validate that measure as a measure that is as effective at identifying things like depression and anxiety in college students. So he's a big fan, and he's going to come and talk with us about that. So please join us for that. The link is also in the chat. And then we have more events coming up in the future. And also just a quick reminder that all of our former events are out in our community. So please join if you haven't already. You could see a recording all about whole person outcomes if you're curious. There's also some cool there's the last Feature Friday, and lots of good recordings. And just a reminder that Janet is awesome, and we hope you will start using it at your agency, that we also offer consulting services. And it's our mission to get your data in your hands so that you can do important, meaningful, beautiful things with it. So we really are excited about offering all these different things to make it easier and more effective for you to get what you need out of your electronic health record. So if you have any questions or anything, you're always welcome to reach out to me. Also, little like spoiler, we're going to be publishing a new website pretty soon. So you'll get to see our pretty new website, which will be even more fun to look at and interesting. So, oh, and if you're going to the National Council Conference, Nicole Morris and I will be there. That's in just a little over a week, I think, week and a half. So stay tuned. We're going to send an email out to let you know how to find us. So we won't have a booth, but we're going to haunt various areas and have fun buttons and swag to give away. So come and find us there. So anything else you wanted to add, Andrew?
No, this has been great. I'm excited about the enthusiasm, both in the poll for all the exciting upcoming things we have, and as well as everyone's questions and comments in the chat. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks everybody. It's wonderful to see you here. We look forward to seeing you at another Feature Friday or Friday Feature, depending on, we'll just keep calling it both. And yeah, hope to see you on the 25th and hopefully maybe see some of you at NatCon. So great to see you, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. All right, everybody, take care. Have a great Friday. Thank you.